Some people seem impossible to control. No matter how charming, convincing, or manipulative a narcissist tries to be, these people never lose themselves. They don't get pulled into endless arguments. They don't spend days questioning their own reality, and somehow they always seem to walk away with their peace intact. What's surprising is that they aren't born this way. They weren't given a special personality. They don't have superhuman confidence. Most of them learn these habits the hard way, through disappointment, betrayal, broken trust, and painful experiences. So what makes them different? The answer isn't strength. It's awareness. Because the moment you understand how manipulation works, it begins to lose its power over you. That's exactly what this video is about. Today, and you'll discover the powerful lessons shared by people who seem emotionally untouchable, are the habits that quietly protect them from manipulation, emotional games, and toxic relationships. And while every lesson matters, the final one changes everything. The habit that often separates people who keep repeating the same painful patterns from those who finally break free. Let's begin. Lesson 1. They stop trying to be liked by everyone. One of the biggest advantages a narcissist has is your need for approval. Think about that for a moment. If someone desperately wants everyone to like them, how easy is it to control that person? All it takes is praise, then a little criticism, then praise again. Slowly, that person's emotions become dependent on someone else's opinion. This emotional cycle is exactly what manipulators often rely on, but emotionally strong people, right? But emotionally strong people don't play this game. They understand something that most people learn far too late. Not everyone will like you. And that's completely normal. The moment you stop chasing approval, you become much harder to manipulate. Imagine two people entering the same conversation. The first person wants to avoid conflict at all costs. They apologize even when they did nothing wrong. Yes, when they want to say no. They ignore their own feelings just to keep someone else happy. The second person is respectful, but honest. If they disagree, they say so calmly. If something feels wrong, they don't pretend it's okay. Someone becomes angry because of healthy boundaries, they don't panic. Who do you think is easier to manipulate? The answer is obvious. Who constantly seek approval, slowly give away their emotional control. People who respect themselves keep it. Doesn't mean becoming cold, arrogant, or selfish. It simply means your self-worth no longer depends on someone else's mood. Powerful difference. Many narcissists are incredibly skilled at making people feel guilty for having boundaries. They may act disappointed. They may become silent. They may accuse you of being selfish. They may even make you question whether you're the problem. But emotionally healthy people recognize these reactions for what they are. They don't rush to fix every uncomfortable emotion another person feels. Instead, they ask themselves one simple question, I treat this person with honesty and respect. If the answer is yes, they remain calm because they understand something important. Someone else's disappointment doesn't automatically mean you did something wrong. This single mindset changes everything. The truth is, people who can't be manipulated don't spend their lives trying to avoid making others uncomfortable. They spend their lives making decisions they can respect. And that's why narcissists often lose interest in them. Manipulation only works when someone is willing to abandon themselves for acceptance. The moment you stop doing that, the entire game begins to fall apart. But this is only the beginning, because there's another habit that makes manipulation even more difficult. It's a habit so simple that most people ignore it completely. Quietly protects emotionally strong people every single day. Let's explore that next. Kaifi lesson 2. Never rush their decisions. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing manipulation always looks aggressive. It doesn't. In fact, the most effective manipulation often feels exciting. It feels urgent. It feels emotional. It feels like you have to make a decision right now. And that's exactly why it works. People who know how to control others rarely give you time to think. Instead, they create pressure. Pressure to answer. Pressure to forgive. Pressure to explain yourself. Pressure to trust them. Pressure to prove your loyalty. The faster you react, the less clearly you think. That's why emotionally strong people have one habit that completely changes the game. They slow down, not because they're weak, not because they're confused, because they understand that clarity almost always arrives after emotion settles. When someone demands an immediate answer, they don't panic. When someone pushes them to make a life-changing decision in the middle of an emotional conversation, they don't react. They pause. They observe. They think. This simple habit protects them from countless mistakes. Imagine receiving a message that instantly makes you feel guilty. Your first instinct is probably to defend yourself, to explain, apologize, to fix the situation immediately. But emotionally resilient people do something different. They wait, not to punish the other person, not to play games. They wait because they know emotions can distort judgment. A decision made in anger is rarely wise. A decision made in fear is rarely balanced. And a decision made under pressure usually benefits the person creating that pressure. Narcissists understand this better than most people. That's why they often create emotional urgency. This is your last chance. If you really cared, why are you taking so long? You've changed. You don't love me anymore. These words aren't always spoken with bad intentions by everyone, but when they're used repeatedly to force decisions or create guilt, they're worth paying attention to. Emotionally healthy people don't let urgency replace judgment. Instead of reacting to the emotion, they examine the situation. They ask themselves questions that most people forget to ask. Why does this decision have to happen today? Who benefits if I act immediately? Would I make the same choice if I waited until tomorrow? These questions may seem simple, but they interrupt manipulation. Because manipulation depends on speed. Awareness depends on patience. Doesn't mean delaying every decision. It means refusing to let someone else's emotions become your deadline. The people narcissists struggle to control are rarely impulsive. They're intentional. They don't confuse pressure with importance. They don't mistake intensity for honesty. And they never assume that strong emotions automatically mean something is true. Think about how many regrets begin with the same sentence. I knew something felt wrong, but I ignored it. That quiet feeling deserves attention. Emotionally strong people don't silence it. They explore it. They understand that intuition isn't magic. It's often the mind recognizing patterns before we consciously understand them. That's why they don't ignore discomfort simply because someone else demands certainty. They stay calm. They collect information. They observe actions instead of promises. Because over time, they've learned one unforgettable lesson. Words can create hope. Emotions can create confusion. But consistent actions reveal reality. The people who become emotionally untouchable aren't the ones who always have the perfect answer. They're the ones who refuse to let temporary emotions decide permanent outcomes. That single habit protects their peace, their confidence, and often their future. And yet, there's another lesson that may be even more important. Because sometimes the biggest mistake isn't trusting too quickly. It's believing that every problem must be explained. The next lesson reveals why emotionally strong people know exactly when to stop explaining themselves, and why that decision quietly takes away one of a manipulator's most powerful tools. Stop explaining themselves to people who refuse to understand. One of the biggest traps in manipulation isn't the argument. Belief that if you just explain yourself one more time, the other person will finally understand. Most people enter difficult conversations with good intentions. They believe honesty will solve the misunderstanding. They believe facts will clear up confusion. They believe kindness will eventually be appreciated. And with emotionally healthy people, that's often true. But manipulators don't always want understanding. Sometimes they want control. And those are two completely different things. When someone genuinely wants to understand you, they listen. They ask questions. They consider your perspective. Even if they disagree, the conversation moves forward. But when someone wants control, the conversation never ends. No explanation is enough. No apology is complete. No amount of proof satisfies them. Every answer simply creates another accusation. Every clarification becomes another opportunity to twist your words. Slowly, you find yourself explaining things that never needed an explanation in the first place, where you were, who you talked to, why you made a certain decision, why you didn't answer fast enough, why you looked tired, why you needed time alone. Eventually, you stop living your life. You start defending it. This is where emotionally strong people make a decision that changes everything. They stop trying to convince people who have already decided not to understand them. That doesn't mean they become rude, doesn't mean they refuse healthy communication. It means they recognize the difference between a conversation and an interrogation. A real conversation brings clarity. A manipulative conversation creates confusion. The goal isn't understanding. The goal is exhaustion, because an exhausted mind becomes easier to control. Think about how many people spend hours replaying conversations in their heads. I should have said this. I forgot to mention that. If only I explained it better. But emotionally resilient people know something important. If someone repeatedly ignores your honesty, another explanation probably won't change their mind. Actions speak louder than endless words. Imagine standing in front of a locked door. You knock once. Nothing happens. You knock again. Still nothing. Would you spend the next 5 hours knocking harder? Of course not. Yet many people do exactly that in relationships. They keep explaining, keep defending, keep proving. Not because the other person is listening, because they hope one more explanation will finally create understanding. But sometimes the door isn't locked because your message is unclear. It's locked because the other person has no intention of opening it. That realization is painful, but it's also incredibly freeing. Emotionally strong people don't waste their energy chasing impossible conversations. They protect their peace. They understand that silence can sometimes communicate more than another paragraph of explanation. When they say no, they don't write a 10-minute speech to justify it. When they make a healthy decision, they don't feel responsible for making everyone comfortable with it. They know that mature people respect boundaries. Manipulative people challenge them. That's an important difference. The more comfortable you become with simple, honest answers, the harder you become to manipulate. Sometimes, no is enough. Sometimes, that doesn't work for me, is enough. Sometimes, I've made my decision is enough. Notice something. None of these responses are aggressive. None of them attack anyone. They simply refuse to enter an endless cycle of emotional negotiation. And that's exactly why they're powerful. Manipulation feeds on attention. It feeds on guilt. It feeds on endless emotional reactions. But when those reactions disappear, manipulation begins to lose its strength. This doesn't happen overnight. At first, staying calm may feel uncomfortable. You may feel guilty. You may wonder if you're being too harsh. But over time, something remarkable happens. You begin to realize that protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's necessary. Take the universal stand, Hardly. Because every minute spent defending your character to someone committed to misunderstanding you is a minute stolen from the life you're trying to build. And once you truly understand that, you stop chasing approval from people who were never are offering acceptance in the first place. But there's one habit even more powerful than this. The habit that allows emotionally strong people to recognize manipulation before it takes control. And once you develop this skill, you'll start noticing warning signs that most people completely miss. They trust patterns, not promises. One of the biggest reasons people stay trapped in unhealthy relationships is that they keep believing words while ignoring behavior. A manipulator can say exactly what you want to hear. They can apologize at the perfect moment. They can promise to change. They can admit every mistake. For a while, it feels like everything is finally getting better. But emotionally strong people have learned a lesson that completely changes the way they judge others. They don't judge people by what they promise. They judge them by what they repeatedly do. Because words are easy. Real change is difficult. Anyone can promise honesty. Anyone can promise respect. Anyone can promise that things will be different this time. But promises don't build trust. Consistency does. Imagine hiring someone who arrives late every single day. Every morning they apologize. Every morning they promise tomorrow will be different. After a month, would you trust the promise? Or would you trust the pattern? The answer is obvious. Yet, when emotions are involved, many people ignore the pattern and keep believing the promise. This is exactly where manipulation becomes powerful. Hope can sometimes become stronger than reality. People don't stay because of what is happening. They stay because of what they hope might happen. Emotionally resilient people understand that hope is valuable. But hope without evidence becomes a trap. That's why they pay attention to repeated behavior. If someone lies once and genuinely accepts responsibility, people can grow. Everyone makes mistakes. But if the same lie keeps returning, if the same disrespect keeps repeating, every apology is followed by the same behavior. The pattern is telling you something that words never will. Actions reveal priorities. Patterns reveal character. And character predicts the future far better than promises ever can. This doesn't mean expecting perfection. Healthy people make mistakes. They lose patience. They misunderstand. They sometimes fail. The difference is simple. Healthy people work to break unhealthy patterns. Manipulative people work to explain them away. Notice how often the focus changes. Instead of discussing their behavior, the conversation becomes about your reaction. Instead of accountability, there's distraction. Instead of change, there's another explanation. Slowly, you stop paying attention to what keeps happening. You become focused on what keeps being said. Emotionally strong people refuse to make that mistake. They quietly observe. Not for a day, not for a week, but over time. Because time removes illusions. Anyone can pretend for a short period. Consistency cannot be faked forever. This is why patience is such a powerful form of protection. It gives reality enough time to reveal itself. Think about the people you trust most. Is it because they once gave an inspiring speech? Probably not. Because their actions remained consistent long after the conversation ended. Trust grows from repeated evidence, not repeated promises. Another habit emotionally resilient people develop is keeping their emotions separate from observable facts. Feelings matter, but feelings are not always accurate descriptions of reality. Someone can make you feel guilty without you actually being guilty. Someone can make you feel responsible for problems you didn't create. Someone can make you doubt yourself simply by repeating the same accusation often enough. That's why emotionally strong people regularly ask themselves one important question. What are the facts? Not assumptions. Not fears. Not hopes. Facts. Facts create clarity. Manipulation creates confusion. The more you return to observable reality, the less power manipulation has over your decisions. This mindset changes every relationship. You stop chasing potential. You start recognizing reality. You stop believing the version of someone they describe. You start noticing the version they repeatedly demonstrate. And that single shift protects you from years of unnecessary pain. Because eventually, every person reveals who they are. Not through one emotional conversation, not through one dramatic apology, but through the patterns they repeat when no one is watching. The strongest people don't ignore those patterns. They learn from them. And because of that, they rarely get trapped in the same cycle twice. But one final lesson remains. The habit that quietly separates people who recover from manipulation from those who spend years carrying its emotional weight. And once you understand it, you'll realize that true freedom doesn't begin when someone else changes. It begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself. They never abandon themselves. Every lesson we've explored leads to this one. Strong boundaries, patience, refusing to over-explain, trusting patterns instead of promises. All of these habits have one purpose. They prevent you from losing the most important relationship you'll ever have, the relationship with yourself. Is where many people get trapped. Not because they don't see the warning signs, but because they slowly stop listening to themselves. At first, it's something small. You ignore a feeling that something isn't right. You stay silent when you wanted to speak. You say, yes, even though every part of you wanted to say, no. You convince yourself that keeping the peace is more important than protecting your peace. Day after day, those small decisions begin to change you. You become quieter, more uncertain, more anxious. You start questioning your own judgment. You wonder if you're being too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult, too demanding. Eventually, you stop asking, what do I need? Instead, You spend all your energy asking, what do they want from me? That is the moment you begin disappearing from your own life. Emotionally resilient people refuse to let that happen. Understand a truth that many people discover only after years of emotional exhaustion. You cannot build a healthy life by constantly abandoning yourself. Real confidence isn't pretending to be fearless, trusting yourself enough to act according to your values, even when someone else doesn't approve. That doesn't mean every decision is easy. Sometimes choosing yourself feels uncomfortable. Sometimes people become angry when you create healthy boundaries. Sometimes you'll disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. But disappointment is not the same as wrongdoing. Someone else's reaction does not automatically define your character. Emotionally strong people know this. That's why they don't measure their worth by how pleased everyone else is. They measure it by whether they acted with honesty, respect, and integrity. And that changes everything. Because once your self-respect becomes stronger than your fear of rejection, manipulation loses one of its greatest weapons. Think back to the beginning of this video. We asked a simple question. Why are some people almost impossible to manipulate? The answer was never that they were stronger. It was never that they were smarter. It was never that they had perfect lives. Their strength came from something much quieter. They stopped searching for permission to value themselves. They accepted that not everyone would understand them. They accepted that healthy boundaries sometimes make unhealthy people uncomfortable. They accepted that protecting their peace wasn't selfish. It was necessary. And once they accepted those truths, everything else began to change. They stopped chasing people who constantly drained them. They stopped defending themselves against endless accusations. They stopped confusing promises with character. Most importantly, they stopped abandoning themselves just to keep someone else happy. That is what emotional freedom looks like. Not about winning every argument. It's not about proving anyone wrong. About reaching a point where someone else's manipulation no longer controls your decisions, your emotions, or your identity. If you remember only one thing from today's video, let it be this. The people who are hardest to manipulate aren't the people who never experience pain. They're the people who refuse to lose themselves because of it. Every healthy boundary you create is a promise to yourself. Every honest decision strengthens your confidence. Every moment you choose self-respect over fear brings you one step closer to becoming emotionally untouchable. That journey doesn't happen in a single day. It happens one decision at a time, one boundary at a time, one lesson at a time. And one day, you'll look back and realize something remarkable. The situations that once stole your peace no longer have the power to control you. Not because the world changed, but because you did. If you found value in today's video, Let me know which lesson resonated with you the most. Your answer might help someone else who is on the same journey. And if you're committed to building emotional strength, self-respect, and a healthier mindset, subscribe for more videos designed to help you understand people, protect your peace, and become the strongest version of yourself. Until next time, take care of your mind, protect your peace, and never forget that the strongest relationship you'll ever build is the one you have with yourself.